I just got back from the 2019 Internet Archive celebration. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what that's like and what I thought of it. This is Jason Scott Talks His Way Out of It, a podcast about technology, history, and getting myself out of debt. Thanks to Daniel Boyd, William Hearn, and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. Working at the Internet Archive is a little bit different for the remote workers, and especially for someone who has a pretty open job description like I do. I mostly work out of New York. I connect to the place every day, meet my coworkers, do meetings, make things happen. But that's not the same as spending day in and day out at the office. When I go out there a few times a year, it's partially to connect with jobs I need to do, but it's also to reconnect with what the headquarters are and how my coworkers are doing, and to remind myself what I've gotten myself into. I'm coming up on 9 years at the Internet Archive. This will be one of my longest positions I've ever had, and it's been so incredibly interesting. The archive is a series of hopes, of ideas, and then implementing them as best as possible in a nonprofit setting. Not looking to create a product that'll be sold, not looking to be bought out by a larger firm, and certainly not looking to attack competitors and enter a marketplace and dominate it by any means necessary. It's a place where people are working hard, day in and day out, to give away as much information as possible, and to make as much of the web and online life accessible as possible. October is the month that we usually make announcements of projects we've been working on. Some of them have been going on for years and then finally are thought to be ready for the public to see. Others are just starting out, and we're introducing people to the idea before we refine it. Examples of really long-term things are that we've been saving every outbound link from Wikipedia so that anytime someone references a website on a Wikipedia article, we take a copy of it the moment that they link to it. And now a bot has been written that crawls through those links, and if they don't work anymore, it rewrites the article to point to the exact date Wayback Machine version so that the citation is never lost. We've saved over 10 million links this way, and we've been doing it for years, spreading to more and more Wikipedia versions and languages as they've allowed us. But I guess this was the year we finally told everybody else. We also added a feature for looking inside of books. If there's a citation of a page of a book on Wikipedia, and we think we have a copy of it and the edition that's being talked about, we'll add a link that goes right into our book reader and goes right to that page to ensure people can read the original and not depend on someone else's description of it, or take their word for it. I have not been the greatest Wikipedia fan over the years, but one of the ways that I dealt with that was I started working for one of the largest caches of original source material that exists. So being able to cross-link Wikipedia over to that cache of original material works just fine for me. Everybody wins. Another big announcement was us and one of the largest booksellers in the country, a mission-driven corporation called Better World Books that for many years has provided a lot of used books and taken in books from libraries and other sources. They are focused on donating as many books as possible while also taking sales and using that to drive the business. We've entered a partnership with them so that we have a list of books that we know we haven't digitized, and now they'll be using integration with that system to ensure that millions of books that pass through their warehouses get compared and sent to us for digitization and storage. This is going to fill enormous gaps, and the Open Library site, which is basically us with a different skin, is going to get even more books you can check out and a greater access to 20th century books, which is where the biggest gap is right now. We also let people know about a thing that we've been doing for a couple years that I knew we were doing, but I guess we also never announced, which is that we've been saving about 11,000 hours of radio every day from 1,100 stations and well over 100 countries around the world, to the point that we now have over 10 million hours of radio. This is in addition to all of the radio stations around the world that I've discovered that are using us as the place to store all of their back archives. You'd think that'd be one or two, but it's dozens and dozens of radio stations in Ecuador, in the Middle East, in Asia, who connect to the Internet Archive every day, dump out all of their shows, and then link to it from their sites. Dozens and dozens. And they weren't telling us. Between all of this and the archive interface we're working on for it, we're talking about years and years of radio history and reference that is going to come up and come alive. Most of the other announcements were pretty straightforward. One particularly special one, though, was Wendy Mora, who has been our Director of Partnerships for a number of years and, in fact, helps put together these October celebrations in a way that is galactically more professional than they used to be. She's got a particular topic of interest to her. That's Japanese incarceration camps of World War II, where the U.S. government created camps all over the country and then rounded up thousands of Japanese American citizens purely based on look, and then kept them in pretty subpar housing for years on end during the war, eventually releasing them only to find that their property was long gone and that their lives were permanently upended. It's a special subject of interest to Wendy. Her family was in an internment camp even while relatives were fighting overseas in World War II. She's concerned, and I completely agree, that the age of the Japanese internment denier is coming. The time when we'll wait till almost everyone who spent time in a camp is gone, and then claims about what actually happened will begin to chip away at the truth. So she's been assisting other groups in making a library of over 500 published books, many of them rare, about the Japanese-American experience during World War II, as well as interviews with residents of different camps that date back decades, and making sure that they're available, referenceable, and permanently here. The event itself is basically a party. We had food trucks and musicians and performers. We had me dressing up my usual crazy way and being the MC. But underlying it all was that it was a moment for the organization to look at what it was doing, seeing what it wanted to announce to the world, and also to have a cutoff deadline for a number of projects to see how they felt instead of just letting them drift on year after year in some half-finished state. A couple weeks before, we had announced that we had 2,500 more MS-DOS programs that people could play, and that ended up dominating the news cycle for October. The Exodus project, which is about 7,000 playable MS-DOS games, had just done an update, and it's been a good number of years since I started using that collection as a basis for playable games, and it was time to write better transfer scripts from how their configurations work to how the Internet Archive does things. The 2,500 programs are mostly tested, mostly checked through. There was a wonderful volunteer named TrueMad who added a screenshotter that I could use, and we started being able to know from automatically playing programs as to whether or not the games were working, and then do repairs as needed. It just blew up in the press. Everybody wanted to announce this. Some people knew we had had this for years and wondered why it was a big deal, while apparently thousands upon thousands of people discovered for the first time that we've been up for this. One of the side effects is it really shows the limits of how this in-browser emulation goes, especially with regards to CD-ROMs. Unfortunately, you have to load the entire CD-ROM image into the browser, have the emulator mount the CD, and then play it that way. Downloading a 400 or 600 or in some cases 1,000 megabyte image, then mounting it, is asking an awful lot of the majority of the world. And I get a lot of email from people not exactly happy that that's what they had to do to play these games. It does mean, though, people are playing them. Of course, I know that because I'm once again getting 1980s and 1990s era tech support questions. Why doesn't this ship work? How do I save a game? Where do I go to get the hint to figure out how to get through this? Is there a manual? Is there a way for me to learn more about the control scheme? It's a victory to make all these games live again, but boy, I do have an inbox I am not enjoying right now. If you're working at a place like the Internet Archive, you're not doing it for Silicon Valley salaries. You're not going to make the money and the stock options you'll make at other places. You're not in startup mode trying to get some exploding half-built thing out far enough for your IPO to happen and then get bought by Facebook or Google. We're in it for the long haul. One of my personal observations is that people come to the archive for 6 weeks or 6 years. Either they come in, they don't find the culture works for them, or they want to do a bunch of things that upend everything else. They don't get what they want, and then they move on. No hard feelings. Others find what they want, and they stay for year after year after year. And you're not going to make what you make elsewhere. What you are going to do is know that the things you're making have a true and honest humanitarian and cultural relevance. It's what drives me every single day. When I'm able to find a bunch of items on the archive that had been uploaded but not exactly classified right, and then I make them available, you'll see me tweet about them, whether it's thousands of Japanese manuals, UFO newsletters, live music recordings, or a pile of MS-DOS games. I drop those because I'm delighted that people are going to show up in droves, not get ads, not get tracked, and have a ball. Because the event is talking about different projects, there are booths outside during the celebration that people can go to and learn more about our different projects. People sign up for it. They're not outside hired folks. They are Internet Archive employees from all over the world and from headquarters who are walking you through projects they themselves may have spent years on. They're proud of them, they want to get feedback, and they do. And behind the scenes, there's an office staff, the front office, that is working for weeks to rent the tents and close down the street and get food trucks in and move out all of the items, make sure everything works, that power flows, that we have a DJ and a VJ and drinks and security, all those things that make a party safe and enjoyable. And they work on it. We recognize them as much as we can, but however much we do it, it's never going to be enough. I've just never had a job like this before. Doing Unix administration for a company that gets bought by another company and then bought by yet another company, or doing video game work, there wasn't anything that reached out to the public like this, where I have my identity wrapped up with the company because I want people to know where I am and what we do. I don't think it's entirely fair for me to say to people, maybe you need a job that makes you feel like this job makes me feel, but it is a sign that I may be wrapped up emotionally and in my life with the Internet Archive, but I don't feel used. I don't feel like I'm a replaceable part that they're just going to find somebody else to do it when I finally burn out. I feel like a component of a team. I have collaborators, conspirators, partners in projects that I'm working on. I walk around on one of my rare visits. I see people I don't normally see, and I get into a conversation that says, are we doing everything we can do? Can we make this better? I want folks who talk to me all year to feel even better about using us. They ask for this feature. They ask for that change. Can we do that? Is that something we can make better? It's not a cost thing. It's not chasing some weird new goal. It's can we do the best of what we do all the time? That's what's kept me there year after year, working on this almost every day, and why I truly enjoy telling people where I work and what I do. It's delightful to me to say nearly 9 years in, I could do this for another 9 years. There's nothing about this that I want to radically change. I want projects to continue. I want to bring in more volunteers. I want to expand some of our holdings, and I want to digitize as much of what's in the storehouses as possible. But I want to keep doing this. I want people to know what we're up to, and I want folks to play a part in adding more and more breathtaking things to the archive. So I'm going to say that in terms of visiting headquarters, the visit went very, very well. Thanks to Mark Pilgrim, Forrest Fuqua, James Bekoyanu, and the hundreds of other supporters on Patreon and elsewhere who have been supporting me and helping me get out of debt. While I was out there for the celebration, I knew I was going to be putting myself through quite a bit of exertion. The designer of the fail whale had made some artwork for us, including a yellow elephant that was meant to represent how we don't forget anything. And she had suggested that we have an elephant mascot costume at the event. Naturally, I jumped for this. I found a great place to rent from in San Jose called Natasha's Attic, and I rented a whole outfit for it, but I then started to feel not so well. My blood pressure had been up for about a week, but I thought it might be involved with a flu that I had earlier in the month, but then I started to get a little bit uncomfortable. Now, there's two ways this could have gone. When I was younger, I would just power through it. I have memories of my blood pressure being taken and it being 145 over, 90 or 100 and thinking to myself, well, I better get that better by next year. But times have changed. I started stopping off at various pharmacies that have free blood pressure checking machines and noticing that the number wasn't going down throughout the day. Finally, the night before the event, I went to the hospital. I know of a very good hospital in the San Francisco area. They're fast. I went in there, just said that my blood pressure was a little bit high. Could you look at it? They put me in a waiting room after they determined I wasn't in pain, took some blood, figured out that I wasn't putting out the enzyme that meant a heart attack, and they did an x-ray to see if they saw any obvious blockages. Everything was clear. They told me, check in with your cardiologist when you get home, but you're good to go. I'm very lucky with health insurance. That entire event probably cost me a couple $100, but the peace of mind and not just figuring it'll all work out meant that I was able to put on that costume, do the emceeing, and run around the place dancing and laughing without the stress, the cloud of the unknown on top of me. That's partially thanks to my insurance, thanks to the income from this podcast, and thanks to everyone who has helped me realize it's not shameful, not weird, and not weakness to want to be looked at to make sure that everything is going okay. Thanks again.